This is, the average, actually specific homes in Cedar Falls, without me knowing, I just knew which neighborhood they were from. Some of them were 8 times the amount of electricity I used per month. And so I said, well, how come? It's like they're paying less, right? That's all of these things. They say, well, we really can't justify, because they're saying, well, really our costs are, they just go by what they just say, well, we can't really justify charging people more if we have this inverted rate so that the larger users pay more. That's what they say, right? That's what they say. But I said, well, we could fund a lot more, all kinds of things. Let's make it. I mean, that's where I think conservation is where we haven't. We're making progress in solar, but I just don't think we're making progress in conservation. We're just not making any. I'm seeing at our university, all the lights are on. Yes, they bought 1,800 panels, but we could have maybe not needed that. It's solar, but all the lights are on. Like we have buildings where our entire south face is glass, and all the lights are on anyway. And if you turn them off, you don't even notice. So for 12 hours, 10 to 12 hours a day, all those lights are on. I mean, building after building after building after building. It's just incredible. I mean, it's just not part of our discussion these days.
Does the city utility also get a better rate the more they buy from the coal?
I don't know. I think so.
Sure.
I think so. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, that's why they're saying, it's all the prices, the priorities are.
Depends on the time of day.
Yeah, exactly. And they're not, even though they have quite a few meters installed that could have time of day prices, but they're not doing that either. So.
And I suppose they're not doing anything about relating to the wattage, the instantaneous wattage. This is 30 years ago. My friend in Norway, anytime they went over 1 kilowatt of power, then they paid 10 times as much. I mean, they got by with it doing that way, but where the pricing is not a function of the total kilowatt hours, but how much you're drawing at what wattage.
I don't think anybody's doing that.
Well, the large customers have demand charges right now, the college and the city and the med center. The largest meters have demand charges, and that's partly why the utilities would say you're not eligible for net metering. This is a struggle, a conversation we've been having with because the lines in America and Iowa do not allow net metering for large general service customers and have those demand charges. But right now, as part of the distributed generation docket and new rate cases, both investor-owned utilities, Line and Mid-American, have essentially declared to the utilities board they're moving in the direction of new rates that incorporate demand charges for all customer classes, possibly. And if they don't get that, at a minimum for all distributed generation customers. In other words, if you're a solar customer, that's going to be a new piece of your puzzle. We'll see where that goes. Now, on the coal plant, do you have all requirements 50-year contract that would, you say, well, why can't CFU just build more solar? And as the economics get better, for example, Warren's co-op, Farmers Electric, they're going down that road. They buy super cheap wind for half of the day, and they use those savings to build more solar. And they have community solar, but they're also building solar rapidly, just as the co-op. Yeah. But a lot of COUs have these obligations with coal plants. Yeah. And so they're locked in.
Yeah, I don't know what their arrangement is with. Well, they built the plant. They own their share. They're not just buying power. It's just like it's as if they are power.
They probably can't sell it either.
No. Yeah.
So in Minnesota's case, did they try to put any on carbon as a benefit, or is that
There is a social cost of carbon in there, yes.
There is?
Yes.
Okay. Because that's a pretty appreciable cost that really upsets all economic calculations is when they don't consider there's no carbon tax.
Yep.
So
Yep.
why not burn coal or rotten wood or whatever?
I mean, one of the interesting things in Cedar Falls is that, you know, there's kind of a moral superiority of, you know, Cedar Falls utilities. We're really good. You know, we're really good. We have good service. People just love them. But in everything they say, we offer absolutely cheapest electrical grid. And they have like Ames, they have a once a year, they have a comparison, you know, Ames, Des Moines, look at all their, you know, they're paying 11, 12 cents, when you're paying 8 cents, okay? And again, I'm kind of in a weird situation where I can't be too critical of them, you know, in Cedar Falls. But you know, the reality of mountaintop removal and how we're beating up on people in eastern Kentucky and West Virginia and Wyoming to have this cheap coal is never brought up, you know. So, you know, the social cost, you know, I think there have been studies of, you know, kind of full cost of coal, and it's, I don't know, it's what supposed to be like 30 cents a kilowatt hour if we actually charge, you know, if companies were accountable to what they've done, you know. Yeah.
So as we think about the possibility of a municipal utility here,
Yes.
one of the daunting aspects of it, in my head, is the value of the grid that exists presently. We probably have to buy that from Alliant.
Yeah,
And
that's the thing.
I assume that
Infrastructure. Yeah.
Cedar Falls already owns that and has historically. It goes way back
Exactly.
many years, right?
Exactly, yeah. And they updated, and one of the really, I mean, Cedar Falls Utilities has made really some smart moves over the years. And one of the most recent one has been kind of trying to make their infrastructure less prone to storms. Because we had a single windstorm that cost, and just one night, cost the Cedar Falls Utilities like $3 million. You know, trees just fell, it was just like 100 miles an hour wind. And so they began next year, everything is going underground. Some of the major arterials and just in the neighborhood, kind of neighborhood scale, everything is gone underground. And you know, there are probably pros and cons of that, but they're doing things to cut their costs and make their system more stable, stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. That's the power of service is all local grid, local, maintaining them and everything. That's what probably most of their costs are locally.
So is the Cedar Falls grid a smart grid that could unhook from the main grid if the big grid went down? Or not?
I don't know, but I doubt it. I mean, they have, I think, some critical operations are. They have, you know, like a gas-powered unit for emergency, maybe to run the sewer plant, or I think some things are hooked up separately, but I don't think as a community we would be like separated. I don't think so, but I don't know.
Does the city still operate that small coal-fired plant?
You know, occasionally. I haven't seen it run lately. But UNI has their coal plant and it's running 24/7. It's about six or 7 megawatts. Cedar Falls, our coal plant in town is like 26 megawatts, but they rarely run it.
Well, that's a problem with locally owned utilities is that the expertise needed now to figure out all the economics of all the different options of how to create a different business model than the previous one is much more complicated. I mean, the people who try and make money doing this are struggling to figure out a business model. To put all that responsibility onto a few people in the office of an existing utility or a new utility is a real difficult challenge, because the answers are simply not out there. So, you look at how utilities have been developed over the years, it was actually quite a simple model. This is really getting to be in some deep woods, and I think that's a real barrier that is difficult to overcome.
Well, Naomi Klein in the book "This Changes Everything" has a chapter on kind of the importance of local ownership of energy infrastructure, and she gives several examples of locally owned utilities doing some smart things, and including a town in Colorado. It would be interesting to kind of look at some examples of communities who were corporate owned and then they switched to locally owned. I think that maybe answers your questions of the difficulties. But really, the city hall would have to be involved in a big way.
Yeah.
Maybe and the county, maybe city and county or something. Because they're public works people, and so yeah, it's gonna require some change. But it's one of those things that major investment that will pay off down the road.
Of course, there are economies of scale for the infrastructure. There are synergies, because when you have one utility and you're going underground, you're going to put all those utilities underground.
Yeah.
As Decorah talks about a communications utility, for example.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then you might think about an electric utility. Again, that infrastructure would all be shared at some point.
I just want to mention one thing. In May, the 350.org is doing a new initiative, and basically it's emphasizing the same thing you're saying, Tommy. We need to get busy right here and doing all the different things we can, invest our creativity, and Harry O'Sliva is leading the charge on that, and committees are meeting to shape that up for, it's called Break Free, 350.org. You can tell them more? Okay. Thank you.
I'll be around, Thanks for coming and listening and sharing ideas.
Thanks, Mark.
Do you have any solar?